losing ground to the movements and technologies of expression. And I think Egypt was the #1 hashtag on Twitter. I won't go through the details, but you can see here the uprising last January 25th. Government cut off the internet, lots of candidates declared. We have tentative elections for Egypt scheduled in June of 2012. So let's meet some of the candidates. We have 11 candidates currently, a few have already dropped out. And what's important about this, you can see the top 5 here are the ones that are kind of dominating the conversations. But if you would have told me a year ago that not only would we have 11 candidates for election, but they would actually be connecting on various platforms to citizens in Egypt. So you see that social media is kind of going from the revolution tool to actually a daily utility, which to me is very exciting. You can see some of these candidates actually have multiple presences on platforms. So I'm going to swap over here and we're going to analyze. So you can see here, what we're first looking at is the last 24 hours in conversations about each of these candidates. And we won't go into too much detail, but you can see some spikes here, predominantly with Amir Moussa, as well as Ahmed Shafiq. One of the things we're going to look at here is trending stories. Everyone's talked about the information overload. You have to have a way to prioritize and digest and filter. So what we're looking at here is we can see some of these stories that have social interactions. This has been mentioned or tweeted or had a status update 700 times the last 4 minutes. That might be important. We can filter maybe by Twitter, by news, by blogs, what's happening. Just allows us to segment it a little bit better. Obviously, right now, everything's in Arabic. The soccer riots kind of have everything erupting, specifically as everyone's talking negatively about SCAF, which is the ruling military. But right now, you can actually break down and see, we're looking at Amir Moussa tweets. So you can see 6 new tweets have happened in the last maybe 30 seconds. So we're going to swap over here. This is the last 5 days. So you can see Amir Moussa still is dominating conversation. And that's predominantly because he made a comment that SCAF will be guaranteeing free elections in June of this year. So you can see him, again, dominating the conversation. We can mute him and look at some of the other ones as well. And you can see that we can break it down by Twitter, our news, our blogs, our Facebook, or even look at some of the videos that are all tagged. And again, we're looking at Amir Moussa. Here we're pulling up in an author profile, and we can see recent posts, or we can look at relevant posts about Amir Moussa and go back and see what all he said. And here's where it gets really exciting. I think in order to really understand what's happening, you have to have a local ontology, and you have to have cultural experts that really understand what's happening so that it's not just more noise. So here you're seeing a custom taxonomy that we're looking at Egypt. Obviously the trending issues, Israel, Constitution, People's Assembly, SCAF, Parliament. These are issues that are important to Egyptians right now, and we're seeing this erupt right now through social media. So if I was to go into SCAF here, right now what we're looking at is conversations about SCAF, again, the military, as it relates to Amir Moussa. We could see what it looks like with one of the other candidates, or we can just look through here. So if we wanted to go a little bit deeper on SCAF, again, with Wednesday's soccer riots, you can see everyone actually having a very negative and high-velocity approach to talking about SCAF. You're seeing new hashtags like no SCAF and several other ones that are creating. So right now what we're looking at is just the trending stories about SCAF, the military rule. So you can see here 56 times in the last minute, 3,500 times in the last 2 hours. Conversations are erupting right now about SCAF. Again, we're looking at Twitter, we're looking at news. And just like we have a taxonomy for the candidates, we may choose to have a taxonomy for an individual topic such as SCAF. So if I wanted to look at just the soccer riots, or maybe just how SCAF is handling emergency law, or what the military trials are looking like with some of the bloggers or the protesters, we could do that. So if I wanted to look at the soccer riots, I could see here, we're looking at SCAF conversations directly about the soccer riots. I could mute that, I could add other people, I could change that to just maybe their leader Tantawi. Let me swap back over. So, in summary, 2011 was definitely a historic year. 2012 aims to be that as well. We'll see what happens with the June 2012 presidential elections. As you can see, there's a lot of different candidates and parties, and democracy can be very messy and unorganized. Complexity needs more complexity to create simplicity, and that's a combination, and you heard everyone talk about it. It's a combination of technology and human experts working together. This piece of software may be the X-ray, you still need doctors to read and interpret it. So the idea is to listen, learn, and act. So thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
I'll test the mic out. Can you all hear me okay? Wait for the slides to come up. My name is Brian Keller. I'm a retired soldier, and I work for a company called SAIC. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about biometrics and where I think biometrics can fit in developmental aid and especially in the diplomatic arena of the Department of State. And I think the slides are probably going to come up in a minute, so this doesn't count against my time, right? It's an exciting topic, and as I'll show you in the brief presentation, biometrics has been around for a long time. It's being used today in many different applications, some of which you may not even realize, some of which have some serious implications for policy issues and freedom, which are certainly things that need to be considered and grappled with as we move forward. But at the same time, using biometrics to support your diplomatic missions is something that's already being used today, and I think will be used a lot more in the future. And I should see the slides pop. There we go. So what are biometrics? You know what biometrics are. It's really the measurement or features of and the collection of data that's used to identify a particular person. It's used by iris, face prints, fingerprints. Those are the things that you're very traditionally aware of. But it's also heartbeats as well. This is what I would say, simply put, biometrics really is. It's a 53-year-old male with blue eyes, not too graying hair yet, and about 210 pounds. But all that can be changed, except for things like DNA and biometrics. It's been around for a long time. In 15 seconds, I will tell you that the Babylonians were using fingerprints to identify particular artists in cave work. In 1805, my old service, the Army, was actually the first service to use biometrics as a way to identify people. So first responders today you would think of as a great application. You want to know who's actually the first responder on an incident scene. You want to make sure he's not somebody that's not supposed to be there. You can use first responding medicine, for example, send back that biometric footprint for a particular person. And there's other challenges that can be overcome in the development and humanitarian aid workers. If you're overseas and you're working with a village in Herat, Afghanistan, and all of a sudden a Taliban member wants to get in there to influence your funding streams, you want to make sure you identify that person as potentially a bad guy or someone that's not supposed to be there. Educational and cultural affairs are another example of using it. Consular affairs have many great applications in voter registration, kinds of aspects, democracy and civil society. And also, who else is using it? You see it today with law enforcement, border patrol agencies. Soldiers on patrol are using biometrics to identify bad people and take them off the battlefield. And I talked to you a little bit about first responders. Those scenarios are key ways that biometrics can be used to assist. So the Department of State's facial recognition system for visa processing, key system used overseas and in our own country to identify and actually say who a person is, make sure we're not getting illegal or terrorists that come into our country. It's a very good process. U.S. Visit is another great example of where especially my company is assisting Customs and Border Patrol and Department of Homeland Security to identify individuals that are crossing the border. Handheld devices are being used tremendously to our advantage today, especially on the borders. The Coast Guard is another great example. Biometrics at sea in Mona Pass in the Caribbean, where tens of thousands of illegal immigrants come in. Who's on those ships? Are they drug smugglers? Are they criminals? Handheld devices used by our Coast Guardsmen can help identify that very quickly while at sea. There are nations now that we are assisting, our government is assisting with national biometric systems. This can help criminal cases, this can help control the borders, and it's biometrics because it's very important to rapidly identify people and ensure that they're the people who they say they are. There's other examples. Walt Disney World is a great example. They make sure when they issue a ticket that sometimes it's expensive, it's not being handed off to somebody else for dual use, and so your fingerprint helps identify and establish you as the bona fides of that holder. Why use it? It's the bottom line. You're going to strengthen security. You're going to save time and money in many ways. You're going to rapidly identify people and save resources, and it's a very effective way to manage systems. Although, like I said at the very beginning, it comes with close consideration of civil liberties that have to always be judged into policy issues. There's a future here. And I think the real-time identification of a person anywhere on the planet can be scary, but it also can be very useful for protecting citizens from harm and keeping people out of harm's way. How will we use it? That's something I think you can discuss amongst yourselves, and we have some literature outside to give you a better appreciation of what it's all about when it comes to fielding and using biometrics, and I'll be around afterwards if you have any questions. So I think I was within my 5-minute limit, and there we go. Thank you.
Okay, so we talked a lot in the first section about theory and vision and challenges. I want to talk about some of what we've been doing in Global Pulse around data collection and analysis and real-time awareness. And we did a series of research projects over the past 6 months that were basically designed to function as a proof of concept to show that there are tools out there that can help us get information faster, and there's signals out there that are relevant to development. So I'm going to take you through a couple of these projects. The first was simply a way to do faster and at scale something that we do ad nauseum today, which is surveys. We do surveys all over the world, but they're slow and they're expensive. Mobile phones have made a big difference, but the problem is scale. You have to set up a server in every country, or you used to have to, until we found out about Jhana. Jhana was set up by Dr. Nathan Eagle. We were able to collect 90,000 answers from 30 different countries in a matter of a few weeks. We built an iPad app together with PopTech. You can see some of the answers that came in. The stuff just flows in because they have a global network that reaches 2.1 billion potential subscribers that they can ask mobile survey-based questions of and credit airtime back to them, so they have an incentive. Very, very interesting possibility. As I mentioned during the panel, the idea of investigating and verifying what's going on using these kinds of networks where you can reach anywhere very, very quickly seems to be very worthwhile to explore. We also wanted to look at whether we could track food security-related challenges by looking at online prices. Even in a lot of developing countries where you don't have a great deal of e-commerce, you have a fair number of people who are advertising online. So we found a company, Price Stats, that came out of MIT's Billion Prices project. They do web scraping of prices, and we wanted to see whether online prices of bread could be found to correlate with prices that the rural poor might experience on the street in a developing country. That was the question. We looked at 6 countries in Latin America. You can see some of these here over the past few years. They are able to calculate the price of bread on a 24-hour basis, basically in real time, and it works. It's very, very interesting. So what happens in a particular country? What you see here is Uruguay for the last few years, and what you're seeing in the gray bars are the monthly official statistics that come out. They're scraping the prices in real time from the same data set on a 24-hour basis, and the curves fit pretty well. It's pretty impressive. So we think there's an opportunity here potentially to track price spikes faster, and of course you can collect this data for free. We then worked with SAS on a project that was looking at unemployment through the lens of social media. We basically wanted to understand, can you get any predictive power out of mining social media around work-related conversations? And can you understand something more about the impacts of job loss on people's lives? To do this, we looked at a couple of different techniques. One was sentiment analysis of the conversations about work before people said online, I lost my job, I got fired. And then we looked at topics that emerged in their lives after they lost their job. It was really interesting. In Ireland, one of the countries we looked at, you see 5 months before, you see a spike, I think it's in confusion. You see spikes in confusion, and then you see spikes in anxiety, and these occur at pretty regular intervals. In the US, what you see by contrast is a spike in anger, and afterward, at predictable intervals, people talking about having to downgrade their housing and move to public transportation. Very, very interesting stuff. Finally, we looked at Twitter in Indonesia. Indonesia is now, by some estimates, the 3rd or 4th largest user of Twitter in the world. And we wanted to see whether, looking at food-related tweets, we could get any sense of what was actually happening. We looked through the data set with a company, Crimson Hexagon, that has an archive for the past couple of years. We found 14 million tweets about food in either Bahasa or Javanese coming from Indonesia. So people tweet about food. They actually tweet about changes in their lives. That's Ramadan. People are talking about meals, and they talk a lot about meals at the beginning of Ramadan, and then at the end of Ramadan, they don't really need to talk about food anymore. So that's a pattern that's traced out in real time through the data. We wanted to know, can you actually get indicators out of this? Well, it turns out what you see on the top graph is tweets about the price of rice per month. People use social media to complain all day long. They complain about prices. The bottom graph is actually the official Indonesian government statistics for the food price inflation. So the curves match pretty well. We want to take this kind of research as a starting framework to apply in our first 2 Pulse labs in Jakarta and Kampala in 2012, and we're going to be adapting these kinds of approaches to country contexts and trying to refine this work. Thank you very much.
I'm Katie Baucom from the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. I work with the Office of America's Division of Homeland Security and support FEMA in disaster response. So Craig kind of stole my thunder this morning a little bit, but I hope to give you a more operational perspective of how we're using social media and what we do. So we have analysts that stay at headquarters here and look at imagery, produce products, and then we actually have teams that go into the field with FEMA and work with their search and rescue teams as well as field offices and logistical support. This is some of our more traditional products that we used to do a couple years ago and continue to do using satellite imagery that identify the areas that have been hit worst by the disaster. These are valuable and can help route supplies, but they also leave a lot of questions. We can see here in Haiti the areas that have been catastrophically damaged, but we also might want to know where the field hospitals are, what kind of supplies they need, where the population's moving. So we've started to look at over the last couple of years where we can get more information, and social media has been a really valuable tool in that. We were looking at individual reports from things like Twitter and Facebook, pictures of damage, on videos of damage on YouTube and Flickr to identify areas of damage that we might not be catching on satellite imagery. And here we mixed out with population damage, population data to figure out where search and rescue or first responders need to go first. So we're also trying to figure out ways to manage social media data right now, but we're also leveraging the volunteer technical community that's out there, things like crisis mappers and those communities that can work a little more openly. You can see here a crowd map that has information we were utilizing from a nuclear plant. We also use Tweak the Tweet. So we're really trying to engage more with the open source community and utilize the data that is out there that isn't as traditional as satellite imagery that we typically use. We're also trying to get real-time data out to our responders using mobile applications. So when they go out in the field, we want them to be able to access the same data that we're getting back at headquarters or at a field office. So we've developed several apps for search and rescue teams where we can harvest Twitter data using keywords or bounding box, and we'll be able to pass that to our search and rescue members will be able to access that on their mobile phone, get that information while they're out on the field. This is an example of how we're trying to answer questions. We used to have locations of distribution centers from organizations like FEMA, but now with social media, we're allowed to look at the density of those and correlate that with the density of people, saying that they need help or supplies on Twitter. Here, look at, and then correlate the densities of both to identify, where help is really needed and where we're not sending it. So we can work with our logistics people that are responding to help set up supplies in the locations where people really need it. Let's see. We're continuing to work on this. It's definitely, government moves a little slower than the open technology, so we're looking at new ways right now to do this. So the developers are out there, definitely keep working. We're constantly looking at ways to understand the mass amounts of data that's coming in. And it's definitely a challenge for us being a traditional imagery agency to move to trusting not only the public, but other organizations that are out there. We've had a lot of success so far. In Japan and Alabama, the public was great in letting us know where the damage was. As the administrator was saying, the whole state was hit by 53 tornadoes in one night, and we just didn't understand the amount of the state that was impacted. So we actually used people uploading pictures, tweet pics or Flickr, anything like that, to try to identify areas of damage so that we could take further looks. These are just a couple of pictures of the apps that we're developing for search and rescue teams to take out into the field. So we're really trying to move from a more traditional approach to take in this capability of real-time data and get it out to our responders. So I think that's about all my time. Yes.